Who are those individuals in your sphere who will give you unfiltered feedback, who will help you become a better version of you? And then are you dedicated to that work over long periods of time? After every interaction, are you mindful and just quickly processing 30 seconds? Did I show up how I wanted to in that interaction?
Meet Sebastian. The team call ends, and he's staring at his reflection through a blank screen, frustrated because he did it again. A developer brought him a problem, and rather than coach or delegate, Sebastian took it on himself. This week, he said he wouldn't do that anymore. He wouldn't be the bottleneck. But he fell into the same pattern. When pressure hits, he takes on more than he can carry. And this is starting to really wear on him. Sebastian is a leader in software development, and he cares deeply about leadership. He reads books, he listens to podcasts, but he tends to struggle with applying what he learns. He'll have all the right intentions, but he falls short when the pressure hits. When there's a sprint or urgent emails, Sebastian takes on more and doesn't say no, and then falls behind because he has way too much on his plate, so he procrastinates. At home, he has 2 young kids that want to play, a wife that wants quality time, but he keeps replaying the meeting he had and the tendency to keep taking on more, and that question that keeps coming up. Why does knowing better never seem to turn into doing better? He knows what he needs to do, but he struggles to implement. He knows he needs to say no sooner. He needs to ask for help faster. That way, he can lead with clarity rather than with chaos. Today, I'm speaking with Scott J. Allen, PhD, leadership educator, researcher, speaker, and host of the podcast, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. Scott helps leaders turn insight into actual behavior, building the daily habits that lead to trust, alignment, and execution. And I'm excited to hear how Scott would help someone like Sebastian finally close the gap between what he knows and how he actually leads. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Scott, I was reading a lot about you and some of the things that you're passionate about in addition to leadership. I learned that you collect meteorites. And I wanted to ask you about that because that piqued my curiosity. How did you get into collecting meteorites?
So I'm sitting on the couch with my wife one night, and I looked over and I said, "Do you mind if I buy a meteorite?" And she looked at me and she thought I was insane and didn't even know that you could collect meteorites. There's a whole community. In fact, my favorite website is called Impactica, but there's, the Tucson Gem Show. So to hold something that is 4.56 billion years old just absolutely blows my mind. Absolutely. So my favorite meteorite, well, I have 2. One, I have some Martian meteorites. I have some lunar meteorites. I have a meteorite. When they opened it up, they had to redate the age of the solar system. It was the oldest material that had ever been found. So my favorite, though, is called the Yende. It fell in Mexico around 1969. Again, 4.56 billion years old. It's just stone, and it's just little pieces of dust. When they examined that, because they wanted to really explore what was going on with the moon rocks and how they compared to some of these other meteorites, they found nanodiamonds. They found all kinds of potentially, they think this type of meteorite may have brought the seeds of life to Earth. So you get into these philosophical, religious, just really interesting conversations. But I've always loved space. I mean, it just blows my mind, the vastness of space. And so to hold a little piece of space, I'm in. It's kind of a quirk, but you know what? It's a lot of fun. It's that meteorite has seen a thing or two.
Yeah. I'm fascinated with space as well, Scott. When
Yeah,
I was in 8th grade, I you know how they have, like, career day?
yeah, oh yeah,
And mine was to be an astronaut. That was mine. And so they took me to this nearby high school, and it had what are those things called? Planetarium? Is that it? The
yeah,
one
yeah,
where yeah,
yep,
yeah, yeah. And
yep,
they showed us all this constellation. It was actually just me and the teacher because I was the only
yeah.
one. And a- and he showed me all the constellations, and I was just blown away. So I can relate to your passion.
Ah, can I give you like a super nerdy, just fascinating fact that keeps my mind? And these aren't going to be exact numbers for listeners, but can I just share one
Yeah,
with you? Okay.
yeah.
So, for listeners, these are not the right numbers that I'm about to share with you, but it will express the vastness. So, Orion, right? You've got the constellation Orion, you've got the three stars in the belt. Well, if from Earth to the first star in the belt, I think it's like 900 light years. And then to the middle star, it's like Earth to that star is like 1200 light years. And then the third star, it's like another 1,000 light years or something like that. So very far away. But now, when you look at how far they are from each other, it's about 900 light years, 1,200 light years. I mean, they are vastly, those three little dots are as far as Earth is to them from one another. So now, again, not exact, but I mean, the vastness is just we can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
And we're on this planet cruising around the sun at about 56,000 kilometers an hour, and the Milky Way is moving at about 1,000,000 miles an hour towards Andromeda, the next closest galaxy. But we won't collide with it for another 4 billion years. I mean, it's just
It's amazing, it's incredible. I mean, it actually is humbling too for me.
it's very.
It it's so humbling, and I will now, when I look up at the stars and I'm gonna look at Orion's belt, I'm gonna have a different perspective thanks to you, Scott.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. We're making our show about space and
Space.
Andromeda galaxies. We've made a shift, everyone. No, no.
Yeah.
What I'm really interested too in learning about your background is what got you into your passion for leadership. I know it's a huge part of your life. You care so much about it. You write so much about it. Take me back, Scott. What lit that fire in you to be so passionate about leadership?
Okay, so it goes back to college. I'd never led anything in high school, and I joined a fraternity at the University of Minnesota. And I immediately took on leadership positions in the organization. And it was an organization that needed a lot of change. I mean, we weren't in a good spot academically, we weren't in a good spot in a number of different ways, living up to the values of what we were founded to be, all of that. And for 4 years, we really worked on improving the organization. We made a lot of change. We won the most improved chapter in the larger fraternity, 140 chapters, a couple years in a row. I mean, that's how far out of the cellar we were climbing. But I was kind of bit by that bug. And then I worked for that fraternity. My boss took us through a book club Thursday mornings, 7 a.m, and we read a book called The Leadership Challenge. And I discovered that leadership was this thing that you could study, that people had studied, that we could learn. And there were so many different aspects because you can look at this topic through the lens of psychology, sociology, cultural anthropology, politics, history. I mean, there's so many lenses that this whole world was opened up. And, that book club completely changed my life, transformed my trajectory, then went on to graduate school, got a PhD, and have just loved and have jet fuel still years and years later, 25 plus years later, for the topic. I mean, I'm endlessly fascinated by humans, how humans work, and how we better prepare people to serve in these really, really challenging roles. Because what people are raising their hands for out there in the world, it's not easy. It's incredibly difficult to do well. So, how do we better prepare them for that work? Set them up for success, set their teams up for success, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love it, and
It was a book
I
club, right? I mean, who would have thought? Yeah.
book clubs, they still lead to such positive outcomes, and
Yeah.
what I'm interested in learning from you is if you've done all this reading and studying and you have such a passion for this, I'm sure have learned some, I guess, different differing opinions about leadership.
Mhm.
And there are, I think, a lot of things that people assume is what makes a great leader. And I'm curious to hear what is something that you found to be like a myth buster. Like, in other words, like
Yeah.
everyone says this and you're
Yep.
like, no, that's not true. What
Yes.
comes to your mind as one of those things that are common leadership things that you're like, you know what? No, in today's world, or maybe from your learning, that's not true.
Okay. So 2 or 3 quick ones. One, leaders are born. So all the research suggests that we can improve, develop, and grow. That some research on twins suggests that it's about 70% environment learned, 30% genetic born, right? So, an example of this might be that if I require less sleep, I'm an individual who just has incredible stamina. Well, that might predispose me and better position me to serve in a position of authority, of leadership, because the hours are going to be long. Or if I prefer extroversion, I might be able to exist in the world a little bit more easily. In fact, talking with people all day long energizes me just naturally, right? Now, so learned versus born versus made. 70% the research on twins, generally speaking, learned. We can all develop, improve, and grow. Another myth is that you have to be an extrovert or you have to be charismatic. That is not the case, right? I don't know that Warren Buffett was extroverted. I don't know that
Right.
he was the most charismatic individual in the world, but he created one of the world's most valuable organizations. So, leaders at the highest levels of all stripes have served in positions of authority, many of whom were introverted. I think probably President Bush, George W. I think probably Obama. I think probably a number of our presidents have been preferred introversion versus extroversion. So those are two that really kind of stand out quick for me. I think the last one I'll say, leaders have to have the answers. No. No, 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 no. I mean, in fact, that's gonna, like, really hurt you as a leader. When we're dealing with complexity, I think leadership is about elevating the right questions for the team to work, and then creating that space, the psychological safety. We've got clarity about our norms, we've got clarity about our process, and then we co-create what we think is the best path forward. We're gonna be running experiments, and Jensen Huang at NVIDIA talks about this, Jeff Bezos talks about this. But when we're problem solving and complexity, and that's what leaders are swimming in today, it's about elevating the right questions for the team to work and then creating the space to get to the best kind of set of experiments for us to run. And for me, I think that's a critical kind of perspective to have as a consideration. Sometimes leaders have the answers for sure, but sometimes they need to sit back and elevate the right questions for the team to work.
Yeah. There are the three things you said there. I'd love to dive into each of them.
Yeah.
The first one is that leaders aren't born, and
Mm.
I agree with that.
Well,
I
they are
think
born.
that okay, but you get what I mean. Yes, like, you're not born only like, you're born as a leader, right?
Yeah,
Everyone's born.
yeah, yeah,
Of
yeah,
course, everyone's born. But my point is, you're not either you're born a leader or you're not,
yeah.
right? And so, what then would you say if someone feels like, "Well, I'm not a natural leader, I don't feel that way,
Mm,
and I aspire to be someone who can lead others." What would you say are the important things that they have to focus on to really cultivate that leader within them?
mm. Well, I think one of the first is an identity shift that, again, ethical, unethical, extroverted, introverted, uh, you, short, tall, doesn't matter. Men, women, all throughout history have assumed positions of authority and worked at the highest levels of global leadership. So there's an identity there that's something I can do. It's an activity I can engage in. So for me, that's kind of ground zero. And then I think it's about, the research on charisma, for instance. People think sometimes, well, I'm not charismatic. Well, all the research suggests that charisma can be learned. You can improve my comedic timing. You can put me in a course about humor and, again, improv, which a lot of leadership is. And we can develop now that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be Will Ferrell. That might not work at that level, but we
Yeah.
can move me from A to M when it comes to charisma. We can help me better understand how to deliver a presentation and use key words that elicit enthusiasm and energy and excitement. We can do that. I can learn that. So I think all of the research suggests that all of us can learn, develop, and grow. So first, you have to have the identity or the mindset that I can lead. And then I think the second is that I can improve, that I can get better. People who prefer introversion at times have some superpowers that people who prefer extroversion don't, that really serve them well when it comes to leadership. And again, some of those extroverts, those charismatic extroverts, sometimes it's an incredible challenge for them to shut up, sit back, and listen when they need to, when they really, really need to, and take
Yeah.
counsel.
Yeah.
So every personality, every style brings benefits and drawbacks. It's about building that self awareness and having that identity that I can develop, I can grow, I can improve for sure.
Yeah.
100%.
And I really appreciate, Scott, your perspective on extroversion versus introversion, because I do think that comes up a lot for people.
Mhm.
I've worked with some incredible
Yeah.
leaders that were introverts,
Yes.
and they had a presence about them.
Mhm.
They were someone of whom you would respect as the authority figure, and they weren't overly animated, and nor were they trying to be. It wasn't
Yes.
like that. That's the other part of this, Scott, right? Which is
Yeah.
like, it isn't like this person was introverted and they were forcing extroversion, and that's what people think. Like, oh, so if I'm an introvert, I have to get myself to be more extroverted. Not necessarily.
No.
What you said was, yes, there are some ways to improve charisma and
Mhm.
communication overall, and to recognize that the parts of you that are introverted that allow for you to lead well are could be superpowers that you
Yes.
can cultivate.
Yes. And I think the other thing is I would want people who prefer introversion to be aware of how it can be interpreted sometimes. I mean, sometimes when you're in the meeting and you're not speaking up, that is interpreted by the person who prefers extroversion as any number of things. Well, this person's insecure, this person's unsure, they don't know, they are lack confidence, they're just quiet. Any number of things are kind of going through that extrovert's head. So the person who prefers introversion, if they're in a position of authority, they need to know that sometimes they need to shift gears and say to the team, I'm really proud of you. That was incredible. Thank you so much. And you know what? We're going to knock this out of the park. So sometimes, or they need to in the meeting say, you know what? I agree with Jay. I think that's a great idea. I think that's the path forward. We should maybe consider X. So it's not that each style has benefits and drawbacks, and each style sometimes may need to flex, just like that extrovert might need to shut the heck up and just sit back and listen and take in the conversation. Bezos kind of famously, in some of his discussions around problem solving, he would speak last. He wanted to take it all in because he knew that if he kind of commanded and drove the conversation, potentially it wouldn't go to the best potential place. So
Yeah.
yes, I mean that's a fun conversation, and oftentimes, it's pushing, helping people push past some of that identity and some of how they're thinking about the role. Because you're exactly right. Some of the best coaches, teachers, leaders, managers I've ever had, they listened and they actually uh, were more measured in their pace and they made better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I am definitely one of those people who had to learn how to shut up.
Yeah, me too.
Scott,
Yeah, me
I
too.
had to learn how to shut up because I love to talk. I love to solve problems. I love to find solutions.
Yes.
And it in those meetings, it at times is uncomfortable for me
Hmm.
to stop talking and ask one more question.
Yes.
rather
Yeah.
than just jump in and say, "You know what? Here's what I think we should do." Blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
You know? And I think the same thing is true, I imagine, for the person who doesn't feel as comfortable speaking up, that there's that discomfort that one would feel where they need to speak up in that meeting and advocate for an idea.
Yes.
What
Yes.
I also yeah, and I also find that a lot of times the introverted person, because they say less, there could often be a lot more power to what they say,
Yeah, yeah, it can be a superpower, right? I mean,
right? Yeah,
when Jay speaks up, people listen, right? Because
yeah,
it's here's part of the thing. I tend to be, you may be this way as well, an extroverted thinker. So I will go on a walk with my wife, and just a bunch of stuff is coming out of my mouth because it's just kind of what's in my head, and she's helping me make sense and process that. And so it can be kind of ugly because it's not, the stuff that comes out of my mouth isn't pretty and it's not well formulated. And I'm just, so you and I, if that's how you were, we might get into the room and just like really love bantering back and forth, kind of trying to seek what we think is the best path forward, seeking truth, right? But yeah, that can be really draining to people watching that sausage being made who were like, come to me when you have a well-formulated thought, Scott, right? Don't bring me through your process." And I think sometimes when you have an extroverted leader who's an extroverted thinker, people either A, walk away from meetings like, well, Jay said we need to probably do this, and it's totally not what you were, just kind of processing and thinking through your ideas.
yeah.
So yeah, I think just like the people who prefer introversion have to be aware of how they can be experienced, those people who prefer extroversion also have to be aware of that and regulate that in real time as appropriate, right?
And there's a word there you said to be aware of, that
Yeah.
I'm curious to dive deeper into with you, because I know how much you advocate for leaders to be self-aware, to really understand their tendencies. So what are some ways in which you encourage leaders to be more self-aware, to understand their patterns, their habits, and so on? Is there practices that you recommend or exercises people can go through to be more self-aware?
Yeah. I've seen a therapist for 18 plus years, and that has been the single greatest leader development, parent development, partner development that I've experienced. Staying with that every 2 weeks, I go on a walk and I talk to my therapist, and he helps me process, again, kind of what's going on in my mind. He helps me interrogate some of my thinking. He helps me stay honest. And then I also have my wife, and again, we walk every day. So she's helping me make sense of and kind of process and be present with what's going on. I also have some mentors that are incredibly important in my life. Individuals that I might go out with and have lunch every quarter, right? They aren't individuals that and I never looked at them and said, would you be my mentor? No, we just built a relationship. And these
Yeah.
are people who are kind of on a rotation that I turn to when I have some of these things that really have my attention, and that I'm kind of in the grip of. So my my greatest gift is having those individuals as thinking partners to help me process. And even, my wife the other day, we were on a walk and she's like, I want you to know this, that this is, I think, how the kids are experiencing you. And I know you might disagree with that. I know that you might think that that's not true, but I want you to know that I think this is how they're experiencing it when you communicate in this way.
Mm.
Brilliant, awesome, right? And that then helps me be more effective when I'm communicating with the kids, because I can have that and I can either manage that impression or I can regulate how I show up. And you know what? So, who are those individuals in your sphere who will give you unfiltered feedback, who will help you become a better version of you? And then are you dedicated to that work over long periods of time? Because every new life experience, as you know, you become you get a partner. Oh, you learn some new things about yourself. You become a parent. Oh, you learn a whole bunch of new things about yourself. You take on a position of management, you learn about yourself. No, now I'm a VP. Okay, there's a ton of stuff swirling around me now. Now I'm learning in new ways as well. So we're constantly, the context is always shifting, and there's not always new opportunities for us to learn. So, what is your process for doing that work? It could be a coach, it could be a person of faith, it could be a mentor. Maybe for you, it's journaling. I kind of don't care what it is. It's just that you have a system and a process in place to keep you in that space of becoming the best version of you. Because what I always say is if others are in your care, that's what they deserve is the best version of you. And you're not perfect, Jay. I'm not perfect at all by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm in the game and I'm trying. I'm trying to become a better version of myself so I can be that best self for others. And that's like self-awareness, that's ground zero for me at least, is who are the individuals in your sphere that are going to help you do that work? What is your
Yeah.
system? What's in place?
Yeah, two things I wanna pull from there, and then I wanna add a third thing to this
Yeah.
because I think it's so important to really integrate into someone's life. Like, this
Yes.
needs to be something that
Yes.
becomes systematic. The first one, Scott, that you said there is the mindset of being open and vulnerable,
Yes.
which you have. You're like, "Okay, I seek this out with
Yes.
genuine interest, and I'm determined to get better." So,
Yes.
that for some people could be hard. It
Yes.
could be hard to have
Yep.
that kind of courage to say, "You know what? I know I'm not perfect. I wanna learn more about me and my patterns, and I'm willing to face that discomfort when someone tells me or calls me out on something," right?
Yep.
Like, whether it's your wife, therapist, whomever.
Yep.
The second, right, was people who challenge you, right? Which is different than I go to coffee shop with a friend and we're just venting about what's going on in our lives.
Yes.
That's a different dynamic than what you
Yes.
described, and I want
Yes.
people to really understand that difference. It's no, this is someone who is giving you that feedback
Yes.
and is willing to have the uncomfortable conversation
Yep.
that will highlight where you may have some opportunity. And then
100%.
and then the third thing that I wanted to get your take on was I find for me, Scott, that so often because I'm coaching others, I learn a lot about me. Like, so in
Yeah.
other words,
Yeah.
I have to be at my best to lead and coach others. And
Mhm.
so I am going through a lot of my own personal development
Yes.
because I'm having those exchanges with other people where I'm trying to help them.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, what do therapists do? Therapists go to therapy, right? I mean, it's baked into. So yes, I mean, again, are you the best possible version of you? Because I view these individuals as high performance athletes. I mean, leaders and managers, it's Herculean. I don't know that we were designed as human beings to kind of endure some of what is swirling on around us right now, the complexity of what's swirling on around us. And, it's, I don't think we're designed for it. So, are you, my friend Amy Elizabeth Fox says it this way: Are you performance ready? And what does that mean for you? And again, it could be an individual, it could also be your faith that is your guiding star. It could also be a keto. Again, I kind of don't care what it is, but you have yoga or you have meditation, you have this system in place that arms you to be resilient through the work. And you know what it feels like to work for someone who's agitated, who's not regulated, who is a little bit tornadic in how they show up. Well, that's going to make the team tornadic, unregulated, stressed. And that's just a recipe. When you look at the Gallup numbers and people who engagement at work and retention issues, and, you know, what is the leader showing up with? What is that energy? And we're not going to be perfect. We're going to make mistakes. But again, from a vulnerability, that word you used, can you circle back with the, I literally this morning on the way to taking my daughter to the BMV, apologized to her for getting short with her when we were practicing yesterday. So
Mm.
when you make a mistake, are you circling back? And it was very quick. I just said, "Hey, I wanted to apologize. I was a little short and curt yesterday. You didn't deserve that." She was like, "No problem." And I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Now I would not have had that modeled ever. And so, again, it's a great example of when we make mistakes, and they will happen with our partners, with our subordinates, with our team members, with our coworkers. Are we self-aware enough to then circle back and make it right. And I think there's a lot of people, you've worked with a lot of people who couldn't do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what I find in myself, and I think this is similar with you, Scott, is I've trained my mind to constantly be reflecting on my behavior throughout the day. So I'm taking inventory constantly.
Mhm.
The conversations I have, as you were saying with your daughter, with my daughter, I feel like, did I get that right?
Yep.
Did I say something I shouldn't have said? And I keep not replaying it like I'm overthinking it.
Yeah.
Instead, I'm just taking inventory of my
Yep.
behavior, my actions,
Yep.
and recognizing where I can improve it. And here's a big part of this too, Scott, which is I do it, at least I do my best to not do it with a lot of self judgment and harsh criticism towards myself.
Mhm.
It's like I know I'm always a work in progress. I know
Yep.
I am.
Yes.
And I don't have to be super critical of every mistake I make,
Nope.
and I can work to right the wrongs as well.
Yes. Yes. And I think you're how you just described that is a really beautiful way of describing it. I don't think this is, oh my gosh, I'm so horrible. I totally messed that up and I'm just not good at this and I'm terrible and I lack emotional intelligence. It just, it's data. And again, if it's data and that it's something I need to circle back for, great. But my friend Joel Rothazer wrote an article called "The Wake I Leave," and he is really good. After every interaction, are you mindful and just quickly processing 30 seconds? Did I show up how I wanted to in that interaction? And so, kind of what you're talking about are some habits of mind that help us kind of pause, reflect. If we need to circle back, we do. If it's just something minor or small or something we adjust it moving forward. But no, we're not going to be perfect. We can't expect perfection. And I think how I always say it is, look, I'm in the game. I'm trying. I'm trying desperately to be the best possible version of myself, and that's not always going to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, and at times it stings
Mhm.
sometimes. Like when I reflect on a conversation and I felt like I didn't show up at my best or I said something I regret, it doesn't feel good. And it,
No.
it's I guess it's okay that it doesn't feel good. You know,
Yeah.
that's my point,
Yeah.
for our listeners. It's not like, this is something that is all going to be sunshine and rainbows if you really commit to it. There are going to
No.
be times where you're like, I can't believe I messed up like that. And then that's where the shift needs to come, where it's like, okay, yes, recognize the mistake and be really kind to yourself. Don't be
Yes.
so harsh. Be able to learn from that experience versus saying, well, I don't want to feel that again. So I'm not going to think about this and I'm never going to
Yep.
go through this kind of thing again. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and think about any other endeavor, right? I want to learn to become a pilot. I want to learn to become a surgeon. I want to be a world-class athlete, which again, I think these individuals, they're high endurance athletes. They are working at very high levels in very difficult circumstances. And mistakes are highly likely, highly
Yeah.
likely. It's how we navigate those, how we process those, and how we learn from and move forward, reflect on. I think there's a fascinating concept in human affairs. It's a cognitive bias called self serving bias. So, for listeners, this is a really important topic when it comes to leadership. Our minds desperately want to externalize and blame others or blame the circumstances as to why something didn't go how we wanted it to. We often, more often than not, own some piece of the dysfunction. Can you see that? Are you reflecting on that? Are you looking in those and are you really looking in the mirror and seeing what's there? And I think leadership, parenting, partnering is, I mean, it's a mirror. And how we show up and whether or not we're willing to truly look in the mirror, I think is an important concept. It's an important activity for anyone who wants to lead effectively. And it's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
self-awareness, right?
Yeah. Taking ownership. Really. I mean,
Yeah.
the victim mindset or the victim role that we tend to play.
Yeah.
I agree that it's just the natural tendency. And
Hmm.
it's interesting because I've been teaching this for years personally, but my mind will still go there.
Of
Like
course it will. Yes.
it will still go there because, like you said, it's just it's being human, and that's where I have to challenge it.
Well,
That's where
here's another parenting example. Like, so my wife and I, for months, were kind of commiserating that our daughters weren't getting enough sleep. And oh, you're waking up late, you're waking up tired, you aren't getting going in the morning, blah 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 blah. And me, I won't speak for my wife, I was looking at it as a deficit in them. Well, if you start really kind of like looking in the mirror, we got him an iPhone. We didn't take the iPhone out of the room at night. We never created that habit, which we probably should have, because guess what the iPhone is? An addictive substance, right? And so, like, I am literally part of the problem. So we sat down, had a conversation with our girls. Technology's out of the room at nights now, and maybe on the weekends they can have it, or on the weekends they can have it. That was the compromise. But, we were part of the problem. Again,
yeah.
my mind wants to externalize it and not put me through the pain of really having to look within.
I'm glad you called it pain. It is
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
It's just real.
Yeah.
It's real. It's the pain of it.
Mhm.
What always happens though when we get through that pain is that we then develop and grow into better versions
Mhm.
of ourselves. We
Yep.
just got to be willing to have to feel that pain.
Yeah.
And what I'd love to learn too about how you would advise someone like what Sebastian, what he's going through, is the people who know what they're supposed to do
Yeah.
and don't do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't mean that harshly. I mean that realistically. Because
Yeah.
what I hear in Sebastian's story, and I've heard it so much, which is like, okay, I learned this idea, this concept, which is, let's say I don't want to take everything on myself. I want to be a better leader. So I want to be able to delegate and ask questions. And then in the moment, the pressure builds and I just go to my default pattern.
Yep.
And I know you really talk a lot about how one can create the habit and actually do the thing, not just think about the thing, right?
Yeah.
How does one work through that? How does someone take this ideas that they have and really put it into practice, Scott?
Yeah. Okay, so I loved the little case of Sebastian, and love how you're approaching your podcast, by the way. I mean,
Oh, thank you.
awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Sebastian, I'm not pretending that this is truth or the correct way. This is kind of how my mind processes working with Sebastian. And that knowing doing gap is very real in human affairs. You just have to look to religion. Depending on your faith, there's some pretty clear things you as a human should or should not do. And even when like heaven and hell is in balance, humans struggle.
So
so
true.
so the greatest of stakes, and we as a species, as a race, we struggle with that knowing doing gap. Again, the formula for weight is not a difficult one. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Living into that is the complexity. At least for me, it has been for years and years and years. Living into doing what I should be doing, if that's something I value. So knowing doing gap, and it's fascinating in training and development, in leader development, that knowing doing gap as well. So first, I'm going to normalize his feelings. It, it what's being asked of you is not easy. You are working at your edge. You're taking your knowledge, skills, and abilities to the next level. And so, first of all, I'm just going to acknowledge and normalize some of kind of what he's experiencing, and it's not unique. It should be what a human is experiencing. You're being asked to do some things maybe you hadn't had to do before, and now, especially if you have like a first time manager or a younger manager, if you think about the number of new things we're asking that individual to master, difficult conversations, systems of accountability, inspiring others, we just go down the list of what we're asking of that human. So I would normalize what's going on for him. I would then try and hone in on his why, and also of the things he described in this case, because I think it can feel really big. We can all think of the 10 things we should be better at, and that can feel big. And then I think we can kind of um, sit in that and feel paralyzed by how big that feels at times.
Mm,
So I'm going to try and hone in on, of all of these things, which one do you want to start practicing? Which one do you want to start getting? Is it the procrastination? Is it better delegation? Is it boundaries so that you have more time with your children? What is it? And we're going to hone in on and we're going to make it small. So, what I'm trying to do is build a muscle here, and I'm trying to make it as small as possible. And this is where you get into the work of James Clear and BJ Fogg. And I think once we've gotten to a place of identifying what it is, and we can start thinking about maybe even the source behind those behaviors. So, Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy have this fascinating instrument, and it's a book as well. It's called Immunity to Change. But what it does is it really kind of starts to unpack and get to the reason behind why we're behaving the way we're behaving. So, I might explore some of that with Sebastian because there's oftentimes very real reasons. He's taking over because he's afraid that if there's a failure, that will impact him. He's micromanaging in certain cases or not establishing boundaries because he wants to be identified as someone who's successful and can handle this new role. And so there's very real reasons why some of the behavior is happening. And some of that has served him well as he's built his career. But some of those things are going to hold him back as he wants to get somewhere new. So for me, what are we going to chunk it down to? What can we actually begin to practice? We make it small, we make it really small. It might even be, Jay, just start observing when you're not delegating again. I want you to count the number of times this week. I just want you to start really making it super present of mind when you have that urge to jump in again, whatever it
yeah.
is. And then we're going to make it small and develop a little bit of a hack. I might encourage him and this is complexity. Humans and behavior change is a complex adaptive challenge. No human is the same. And so how we actually work to change those behaviors, we're going to have to do some experimentation. And I'm going to normalize that. Like, hey, we're going to try some things and they may work for you, they may not work for you. When it comes to reflection, me journaling, it never worked. If you told me reflection is, journaling, I wouldn't reflect. But once I understood it was I could be with a therapist or my wife, I'm in. A mentor, sure. So for some reason that worked for me. For you, Jay, it might be journaling. So we're going to normalize the experimentation process as well. And we're going to keep it really small. Can you observe when you're in the grip of this feeling again? Can you observe when you're with your children and not establishing those boundaries or holding to those boundaries? Can you observe it and make it top of mind? And we're going to talk about how often he noticed that in the last week. Or we might develop a little bit of a hack. At the beginning of the year, Jay, my wife is incredible at thinking of others. Her mind just goes there. It's beautiful. And she's actually trained that in our children. Our girls will come home from school and say, I'm going to make cookies. And we'll say, well, why? And she'll say, well, Francis had a rough day. Okay.
Wow.
Like awesomeness, right? My mind, that's not how I kind of was built, but I'm trying to model gratitude and kindness. So, a recurring daily task for me is one act of gratitude, one act of kindness. It's one of the first tasks I do in the day. And that is a little bit of a hack that I've developed that's helped me try to be a little bit more present so that I can build that habit of mind. Eventually, I probably won't need that. My mind will just go there more naturally, but I'm literally creating new neural pathways
Yep.
to circumvent kind of what the neural pathway was. And so I have a little bit of a hack that's helping me do
Yeah.
that. So Sebastian and I might talk about some hacks and talk about some ways that we can keep him present top of mind. Maybe it's a text from me a couple times a day. Maybe it's a reoccurring task. Who knows what it is, but we'll brainstorm 10, 12, 14 things that we could try and then start to experiment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
make it small and then experiment, right?
I love it. I've had this vision in my head as you were describing it of a highway that you drive down, and
Mhm.
if you have a highway where there's all these different signs, it can become overwhelming,
Oh
right?
my
That's like you
gosh.
trying to do all the
Yes.
things, right? It's like there's 100 different signs, go here, go here, go here, and you're like,
Mhm.
I don't know what to do, and you just keep driving.
Yep.
What you're saying is one sign, just
Yeah.
one clear sign
Yep.
that comes up to make a turn,
Yes.
right? Which is then establishing that new neural pathway.
Love
And
that.
if you have that, then it becomes normalized. Then you don't really need the sign anymore. When you get to this kind of fork, to make the turn, the sign is not even something you're noticing. It could even be taken down and it won't be a problem anymore.
Yes.
Then it's the next one. Then it's the next one.
Yes, and we start building that muscle, celebrating the wins. Like the win at first might just be, okay, how many times did you notice it this week? And we get Sebastian to say 3 or 4 times. Okay, tell me about it. What happened? And you celebrate that win. I was telling you before we started recording, we just trained our girls to drive. Well, you don't that feels their minds go to, I'm gonna have to drive on the highway. Well, that's really big. No, no, no. We're gonna sit in the car and you're gonna turn it on. you know, and we slowly build, you don't immediately go to the highway, you pull out of the driveway and, go around the cul-de-sac a couple times,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
And so but I think once you start to build that muscle, we talked earlier about identity, an identity shift starts to happen. This person now knows that they can tackle this in other areas of their lives. They know to make it small. They know to start to notice. They know to reach out to have a support system. They know to and so then we can use that process and that model in a number of different elements of their lives. But I think it's about guiding and coaching, and I see this happen all the time. Like you could say, like in an auto dealership, the sales manager's like, you got to get to 20, you got to get to 20 a month. And they just kind of do that and then expect the human to figure that out for themselves. Maybe they put them in 2 days of like in classroom training. Well, how do you actually truly build a salesperson like with excellence? And that there's a lot of steps to that, and there's a lot of work to that coaching. So you're shifting the individual's identity also as to someone who can tackle these things on their own, and they're good, and it's
Yeah.
normal, and they aren't
Yeah.
weird because what they're doing is difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people feel that sense of discouragement of like, oh, well, I wanted to put all these, and I think that's in Sebastian's story. I want to do
Well,
all these things, and I
yes,
and I keep falling short.
it's so big in our heads that of course no human can change all of that stuff overnight. Again, just look at the brain makeup. The neurons are set. Those don't shift overnight. Uh, They they can. It's called a disorienting dilemma. There's things at times that happen in people's lives that make a shift quickly. But generally speaking, when it comes to us proactively, you said he wants to get better. He wants to do well. That motivation to learn is awesome. That motivation to change is awesome. So we have that. But yeah, we need to help him and guide him in that process of making it small, building some wins, gaining some momentum. Okay, now what's the next thing? And we're going to work there. And over a year, over 2 years, over 3 years. And this is, Jay, where I think for me, the fact that I've been doing the work that I've done for years and years and years, it really starts to show up. And you go from kind of
Yep.
survival to thriving, and it becomes a habit of mind, it becomes a way of thinking
Yep.
about the work. And but again, that doesn't mean that even because this is my mindset, I have everything figured out in my life and it's perfect. No, I'm working on it.
We're always working on it. The work's never done, right? And
No.
so, Scott, I want to ask you because I know how important questions are to the work that you do and how you encourage people to really have that kind of curiosity in how they lead others. And so if you were to meet Sebastian in this story and he tells you his story and what he's going through, and you have an opportunity to ask him a question or two after listening and normalizing what he's going through, what might you ask him, Scott, and why?
Yeah. I might say, of everything you've just said, What, in your opinion, would have the greatest impact on your quality of life? What's really important to you? And again, I probably heard 15 things, and we're going to bring it down to one or two, and then I'm going to get into the why that that's important to him and why that would fundamentally shift. Again, it might be prioritizing his kids and establishing some boundaries. And I'm going to hone in on that and hone in on where there's energy, the why, and then that's where we start. And
Yeah.
so I think those are a couple things that come to mind for me as a place to begin the dialogue.
Yeah. Where does he want to start and why there? Why is that important to him? And that
Yeah.
then appropriates the meaning, which gives him the motivation and drive to really commit to
Yes.
change. I
Yes.
love it, Scott. And
And then
and
I'm going to
for
try and build some architecture, some infrastructure about how then we continue that work and how we get him the wins and prioritize celebrating those wins because that's critical. Those are little dopamine hits, and those are again, it kind of truncates it a little bit, and it also builds another habit of mind of seeing the good because our mind's negativity bias, we tend to still see the gaps where we aren't, where it isn't, where we can't. Well, we're in process, and can we
yeah.
name that as well?
Right. What we're always going to be focusing on is where we're falling short. And when we have someone like you in our lives, you can help us to highlight, wait, you're actually having here's progress. I
Yes,
see the progress. Let's
yes,
celebrate that progress. And
yes,
for our listeners to see more about the great work Scott's doing, Scott, I know you're really active on LinkedIn. That's a great place for people to find you. Just search Scott J. Allen, and they will find you there on LinkedIn. You're posting
yep.
regularly, a lot of information and insights on leadership, how we manage through change and uncertainty, which is so important in today's world. So, Scott, I want to thank you, my friend, for carving out time out of your day and chatting with me, man. This was fantastic. I appreciate you.
Jay, keep up the great work. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Love the combo.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Scott, and he was so kind. He actually sent me a meteorite. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding it. If you're listening, it's in my hand right now. It's very thoughtful as a thank you for the time we had together, and I will do my best to share with you what I think are three insights and three actionable takeaways from our conversation. The first one is leaders are made, not born. That research on identical twins and how 70% of our behaviors are learned and 30% is genetic, that's powerful. So rather than immediately going to what are the skills you need to develop, the first thing to do is shift your beliefs around things. That any of this can be learned. Charisma, communication, leadership, all of it. These are skills, they're not traits. Second insight, self-awareness is ground zero for leadership. We need to be able to cultivate self-awareness because our minds are always going to lead to self-preservation. That's the natural human instinct. A leader needs to be able to drop that ego, so it really requires us to be more self-aware. Third insight, the knowing doing gap is real and normal. So many people know what to do but don't do it. So don't be so hard on yourself if you're falling into that pattern. And again, and what is I think required is to make incremental progress, to not have this expectation that you should immediately change all of your behavior overnight just because you decide you want to. Actionable takeaways. First to three. First one, build a feedback circle. Have one or two people that you can trust that you will give you honest feedback. It could be a mentor, a coach, it could be a therapist, it could be a partner. The vehicle isn't as important as it being an honest conversation. We all need it. Second actionable takeaway, the 30-second inventory. I'm going to call it that. The 30-second inventory. After you have an interaction with someone, take 30 seconds and ask yourself, did I show up the way I wanted to? Did I show up at my very best? And if you didn't, just take inventory of that. Also, if you did, acknowledge what you did well and celebrate those wins. And the third actionable takeaway, make the change laughably small. I said it a moment ago about not having those expectations that you're going to completely change everything. Start so small. That way you can really build yourself up and you can celebrate each win, because in the end, any habit takes time and commitment for you to be able to make it something that's routine. Have healthy expectations and start small. Join us on Friday's episode. I'm going to talk about 3 things on Friday. I'm going to talk about 1, self-criticism, 2, self-observation, and 3, flow states. Self-criticism, the first one, we all know is not going to be of great value to you. And I explain why and the implications there and how often this is a problem in the people I've worked with. And the last 2, self-observation and flow states, actually came from a conversation I had recently with my editor about the book that I'm writing, where she challenged me on this. And I explained the difference between the 2 and how they apply to people's day-to-day. And I figure I'll share that with you on the Friday's episode. Because if you really want to be someone who performs better and is able to take action and achieve great results, you're going to need both of these things. You're going to need self-observation and flow states. And I'll give you real-life examples of how you can apply it into your day-to-day. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. I am rooting for you.